Hello, everybody. It's Max with Crypto Talk Now. I'm going to give you guys an update in regards to a few recent developments from DFFT, Data Free Flow with Trust. We're going to get into this thing in regards to healthcare, Japan, Jasmy connection, and so on. We're also going to talk about some of these recent findings that are actually not so recent, is confirming some things that we found in the past in regards to Jasmy. I know it's been a while since I've done a Jasmy video, and I know that a lot of people, of course, regularly expect these updates. Have had to deal with a lot of unfortunate real life problems and so on, but nonetheless, I'm glad to be here with you guys today and give you a few of these updates. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into today's outline for Jasmy. All right, so let's start things off with a few confirmed recent things, or findings I should say. And before we get into a blast from a past that's actually now been confirmed, let's start things off with what you see right here, right? Jasmy real world use case. Because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. We want to see the utility of Jasmy be used, whether it's in the form of, a personal data locker, whether it's, some of these secure PCs being sold. But how about this? And we'll show this on the outline. Jasmy secure PCs to be sold in the United States. That sounds pretty bullish, right? Well, we're going to start things off with this guy. His name is Matt for the Money. He says, imagine three personas, users like you and me, service providers that you're very familiar with, Meta, aka Facebook, and also TikTok. Data utilizers, advertisers. We know about some of these things, right? But one of the things I want to mention here is this part. Users, right? You and me, being able to make money through monetizing our data, right? Users make money by selling to providers, service providers, and service providers pay data utilizers. All three personas are happy. Let's blow this up. It shows that service providers can deploy services to users and accumulate, again, personal data. But you are in control of where that data goes. Data users, secondary use of personal data to grow value. You see the breakdown that is basically listed here. Now, while that's, a very simple, non-complex visual, it's plain as day. Data utilizers goes back and forth with, for instance, the PDL, personal data lockers. When I get further into this outline that we have for Jasmy, for instance, I came to the conclusion that there is some recent things that is definitely worth noting, since we're on the subject of the PDL. Shout out to Dip Metaverse. He mentions that, for instance, there was a space, a Jasmy grant space a few days ago. Quite a few people, of course, attended this. But something I want to point out to you guys is that in this space that was roughly 2 days ago or more, depending on how soon you see this video, Hara mentioned that Sato, remember Sato? Kazumasa Sato, some people refer to him as Sato-san, and Hagawara were on the West Coast. And of course, he's guessing Silicon Valley, and that Hara would update us on their trip soon. Well, I'm going to get down to this part, and it's a great question. It says, many researchers in the group have had, this question, and that basically is, what is the latest tech company? Is it a typo that was mentioned before? Did Hara say the latest because of the potential partner company, right? And so on. Great question. So Jesse, shout out to Jesse, give him a follow at KIR Finance, aka Keeping It Real Finance. He has mentioned, and this is a great question, this dates all the way back to March 21st, 2023. It says, for the last question, can you please provide us an update on Ken Mura and his efforts to expand Jasmy to Silicon Valley? Now, this was something that was asked like a long time ago, I believe over a year ago. And of course, Hara mentions Mr. Mura is currently working on two main projects. One is a business partnership with the latest tech company in Silicon Valley. And, the second is to sell Jasmy blockchain integrated laptop to the US market. We are working, of course, with the Avita team on this. We've seen some updates in regards to Avita, but what about specifically what's going on here in, the United States? Silicon Valley is a real thing. Well, there's of course this update, and it was supposed, posted on June 27th, a few days ago, and of course people were referencing some of these things from the past. Speaking of which, here is what was from the past. This is from Reddit. It says probably Jasmy's USA office, but look at this. We have talked about Bajit many times here on Crypto Talk Now, whether it's on the live show, these recordings, and so on. Bajit has Jasmy as a customer/partner with the one, the only Kazumasa Sato. And of course, he's the shareholder. And look what it mentions, West Coast office location. Where? Well, look, Silicon Valley. And look what's highlighted. This location was established, I guess, October 1st of 2014, a long time ago. But the shareholder is Bajit, and reference is Kazumasa Sato. There's the address, plain as day. That would technically be Silicon Valley, Palo Alto, San Francisco Bay Area, Oakland, San Jose, right? So will we hear more things here soon in regards to, Jasmy's blockchain, secure blockchain PCs being sold in the United States? That'd be pretty massive, right? Will we see more of the utility being used? Because if people buy these, secure PCs and so on, well, if anything, I imagine that people are going to have personal data lockers. And if personal data lockers is the utility being used, well, we can put two and two together. All right, let's jump into something that I recently found. And of course, this is quite the deep dive. It's something that I do. I've gotten some criticism, some people saying, hey, you need to put it all in 10 minutes. If that's what you're asking for, we are not that channel. Sometimes we can give that to you, but other times I do like to do the deep dives. And if anything, gotten more, I guess you could say, followers and compliments in regards to doing a deep dive compared to just jamming it all in 10 minutes. So as the saying goes, can't please everybody. But I do appreciate the constructive criticism. I don't dismiss it. Sometimes you'll see it, sometimes you won't in regards to a 10-minute update. But for the most part, like I mentioned, these deep dives is what we bring here from CTN. All right, so Japan law. Let's talk about it for a brief moment. So look what it says. And this comes from Lean 6 DeFi. This law is to merge health insurance cards with My Number IDs. And when we get more into this outline, this will probably be one of the key areas for tonight's deep dive. It says Jasmy could possibly take the lead and advocate of, data security that resides on the blockchain. Always do your own research. Now, some people are going to say, Max, this is a stretch. This is a nothing burger. I don't think it is. Look what's referenced here. It comes from streetinsider.com. Japan merging healthcare data. Let's blow it up. With my card, highlights Jasmy's personal data locker. Again, that doesn't sound like a nothing burger to me. June 12th, Japan's new law to merge healthcare insurance data with my ID card highlights the shift underway toward data privacy tools like Jasmy's personal data lockers. It says digital, but in reality, data lockers. There's, of course, this article. You're welcome to nerd it out. I'm not going to get into it because this is going to be quite the deep dive anyway. But as we get more into this and so on, what's really interesting is some of the things that are posted here. And, of course, this is in regards to Japan merging healthcare data, like I mentioned, with MyCard. And some of the key highlights. Now, this, of course, had a press release on June 15th, not that long ago. But when we got into this, or get into this, look what's mentioned here. Data Privacy Week might be an annual campaign that aims to educate people and businesses about the value of maintaining online privacy. And we know that when it comes to Jasmy, they're all about online privacy. You have access, whether you're in Japan and so on, other places in the world, using their utility to have control of your data. The decentralization of data sounds beautiful. Almost sounds like the label of what Jasmy is, the Bitcoin of Japan, because we know that, for instance, BTC has always been labeled as, the one that gives you freedom, as some people say. I just feel as though there's better opportunities. But back to the subject in regards to Jasmy, when you see things posted here about, the value of maintaining online privacy, Privacy laws continue to grow across the world. They are. Most businesses are realizing that people could soon become a lot more demanding about the need to uphold the sacredness. Think about this. This totally spells out Japan in itself, right? Does it not? Difference in culture of their personal data. Not allowing marketing agencies, right? Like the likes of Google, Meta, Amazon, you name it, or data aggregators to get easy access to sensitive information. And what is that sensitive information? Is it, for instance, is healthcare very sensitive data? You better believe it is. We know that basically speaking here in the United States, when it comes to sensitive data, I think of, for instance, HIPAA laws, right? And if you understand HIPAA, you understand that that is like your privacy rights when it comes to medical, the medical industry and so on. You have a right on who sees your medical history, your medical data, and so on. You have to sign off on that. If you live, of course, outside the United States, maybe you're not familiar with that. But we're going to take more of an extensive look into why this should matter and why I feel that much more bullish on the idea of Jasmy being tied into some of these key sectors. So it goes on to also mention better, more foolproof data security standards are being demanded by people and governments, increasingly trying to settle the growing apprehensions about illicit data sharing. Recently, if you didn't know, Japan enacted a law that merges the health insurance cards of its citizens with the unique My Number IDs called My Card. And like it shows, this is just one of the many recent trends that are indicating a gradual shift towards what? Guarding the personal data of the people. Now, when we talk about Jasmy, or especially Japan and so on, we're always mentioning about DFFT, Data Free Flow with Trust. We understand that it is basically the regulatory framework that not only leads Japan towards regulatory clarity, but leads the world coming up here soon. Especially, let's face it, probably by October, we should see some big things. And by the end of the outline, we'll show you some of the proof in that regard to some of the big dates of October. For regulatory bodies and the people, real-life examples of such outcomes being achieved by some crypto brands, for instance, and currencies are getting increasingly hard to ignore. True. Now, we're going to jump down to this part, the My Card, right? Because that's one of the key things of this outline. This process, believe it or not, if you weren't aware of it, started back in 2016. And it provided the Japanese people with a 12-digit number card that captured comprehensive personal data of the people. This included things like access to Social Security or taxation. With the merging of healthcare insurance data with this specific card, the country is essentially adding more fuel to the country's digitalization process. While people might claim that the big benefit about data centralization, because we're always talking about decentralization, via one card, easing digital data processing when seeking treatments or making a health insurance claim, it is also about adding more layers of security to someone's personal data. The card functioning just like a locker. Think about all this terminology that's basically mentioned here. Jasmy personal data lockers. Is this not connecting the dots at this point? Containing valuable items, albeit in a digital form. Very, very true. And there's, of course, a lot more into this, and I would totally recommend looking into this, but I'll read this last quote from this, and then, if anything, this outline is going to pound it home that much more why we pay attention to this stuff. Quote, Jasmy platform users have personal data locker in our distributed storage to hold their data. Important personal data and IoT device data will be stored and managed in lockers. Again, we know this. All events like sharing data to whom and to what extent will be determined by the users themselves. Quoted, of course, from Hiroshi Harada, aka Hara, CFO of Jasmy. And of course, there's, again, quite the outline here, and I'm not going to get into all of it, but, it's nice to see some of this referenced, and especially from other news outlets. Now, jumping back to what we have here. This was reported on June 2nd from Kyoto News. And we know that when it comes to this new blockchain conference, it's going to take place, I believe, in Kyoto, Japan, right? Ripple's the diamond sponsor of IVS Crypto 2023. So Japan enacts this law to merge healthcare insurance cards, of course, like I mentioned, with My Number IDs. And one of the key things that is basically mentioned is how the government, specifically Japan, aims to execute the integration in fall. And by the end of the outline, we're going to get into some of these things of why it's so important to pay attention to. This is going to, like it mentions, despite the growing concern about security of personal data retained under the My Number system, but it's going to allow, for instance, thousands of cases in which health insurance data was erroneously registered and exposed. But with this enactment, everyone in Japan would effectively, listen to this, be required to obtain this My Number ID card because Japan's health insurance system covers all residents. Again, a different type of situation on the opposite side of the world. The House of Councilors on Friday, at least then, approved the bill that was already cleared by the House of Representatives. And you did see this if you were like on crypto Twitter. Some people basically shared some of this. Here's some of the pictures. And, you know, this, of course, was on June 2nd. But the point is, the reason why I'm sharing it with you guys is I'm going to tie some things in on this outline to blend it all together to have a broader sense of like, wow, you know what? It's one thing that Japan is leading the charge, but it's another thing to see their actual people use some of these things and then some of the terminology used about like personal data lockers and so on. And we understand that Jasmy's utility is all about that. How about this? Once the health insurance cards are integrated, people will be required to present their number cards at hospitals in order to have their medical expenses covered by national insurance. Now, if we know that, you know, especially here in the United States, that HIPAA laws state that you have to sign off on who has access to your data, let's face it, or read medical forms, you name it, and so on. How would you like to have a digital version of this, but on blockchain, right, through a personal data locker, but for instance, a whole entire industry, as in the health insurance industry, basically utilizing the utility of Jasmy's personal data locker. This is absolutely massive because we understand that we want institutional adoption. You better believe that the healthcare industry is part of that institutional adoption. That's mass adoption, 110%. The government says certificates will be used, or issued, I should say, to those who do not possess My Number cards, but they would need to be renewed every year. Individuals without a My Number card would pay more for treatment. So either way you want to look at it, this is something that would dramatically use, for instance, Jasmy's personal data locker through this particular form. And of course, under the My Number ID card, launched all the way back in 2016, a 12-digit number is issued to each citizen, and watch this, and foreign resident of Japan to link a range of what? Personal data, such as information related to taxes and Social Security. The government introduces this system as part of efforts to drive the country's digitalization, claiming it would increase convenience by enabling various procedures to be completed electronically. And what better way to get things done than putting it on, for instance, blockchain? What is one of the industry leaders that can help get it done is Jasmy. Now, flooders will say, no, that's not the case. Well, then who is the real true competition if that's the case? And do these competitors have the connections that Jasmy has? For instance, let's just throw this guy out there one more time, right? Mr. Genki Oda of, for instance, SBI, BitPoint. You get where I'm going with this. He's well connected. He is a decision maker, and he's also well partnered with the likes of Jasmy. So we put 2 and 2 together, and it still equals 4, and not some crazy off the wall thing that Flutters claim that there's no connection. Well, I'm sorry. At the end of the day, the research trumps the FUD 110%. Now, it gets better with this. It gets a lot better with this. And here's a reference that we need to have. Back on April 4th of 2022, this outline, shout out to this guy, Austin, who can be followed at Big Hold IO. How blockchain can democratize consumer data. We know about some of this stuff. Look at what's referenced. Google, Amazon, Facebook, right? These are all major tech companies that take personal data. This is a thread. But what I like that is mentioned here, and again, this is the introduction to this. When I talked about HIPAA laws here in the United States, you got to reference like, does Japan have anything like that? And if so, what's it called? Let's introduce this. And it's basically APPI, like it shows on this one. I'll blow it up a little bit more. Several countries have begun creating privacy laws that will bring data protection into the hands of what? Consumers. The Japan APPI, or the Act on the Protection of Personal Information, going into place on April 1st, at least then of 2022, was a great example. This is Japan's version of HIPAA. If you're wondering more about this, this act gives Japanese citizens the right to stop and limit their use of their personal data. It will also require organizations to follow strict guidelines, creating new privacy for consumers and decreasing the power tech giants in regards to having access over personal information. Who are the key players that's involved here? You better believe it's the healthcare industry. But who's another key player to accelerate that adoption? I want to state this, all right? Of course, we're going with the whole topic of Jasmy, but like I explained on the live show, the other night I was driving to In-N-Out Burger, right? It's a popular, great quality, American hamburger here in the United States. And you have to wait a long time in line to get that hamburger because it's great quality. But in the process of doing so, I would turn on, for instance, a podcast. And while I don't exactly remember the lady's name who was featured on there, she was from the healthcare industry. And she basically outlined that she had over 20 years in the industry. But one of the biggest gripes was that we need, especially here in the United States, to get away from this notion of everything should be just stationary. The old traditional way of going about things, literally paper and pencil, and it just putting everything on a classic type of ledger. And she, let everybody know that if we can put everything on blockchain, that dramatically accelerates not only ease of access, but just simply getting things done at scale, right? And basically speaking, that's huge. Time is money, and especially when it comes to the healthcare industry, because it sometimes moves at a snail's pace. She mentioned that if we can get everything across the board on blockchain, especially the healthcare industry, you will have rapidly accelerated something that would normally take anywhere from a year to year and a half to get fully completed, but have it basically be at the grasp of people's, just given access immediately to a sense because they have access on chain. That in itself is huge. When we get more into this, it says that on top of laws, countries are beginning to implement blockchain solutions to solve privacy issues. Here's an example. Buenos Aires, they are working on a digital identity platform that will give residents, control over their data. It's set to be operational by the first quarter of 2023. And of course, I didn't have a chance to look more into that, but imagine that's a big deal. How about this for a second before we kick it more into this outline? Did you know that the amount of data generated by IoT devices is expected to reach 73.1 ZB, which is zettabytes, by 2025? This clocks it at an enormous amount, over 400% the output in 2019, by storing consumer data on the blockchain. A little bit kind of like what I was mentioning before. Users will be able to personally secure their information. At the end of the day, when we talk about certain blockchain projects, does your project have true utility? And if anything, does it have multiple layers of utility? Jasmy has a tremendous amount of layers of utility. We're talking about the healthcare industry, for crying out loud. So many times people just put focus on just the payment channels. Healthcare in itself is a big, huge industry. Jumping into this, we just talked about APPI. Let's talk about this for a brief moment. And if anything, I'll try to blow this up a little bit more. So on this outline, it mentions the Japan Act on the protection of personal information. And this is, of course, an explanation, and we'll get into the highlights. This Japan Act on the Protection of Personal Information, also known as APPI, is an act designed to protect the personal information of Japanese citizens. Anyone who receives the personal data of Japanese citizens must be in full compliance, again, with the Act on the Protection of Personal Information or risk legal action. We understand that Jasmy was one of the key blockchain projects that basically was the first to be compliant with the FSA, Japan's version of the SEC. Again, I have respect for their version of the SEC, and I have no respect for our SEC in the United States. This Japan privacy law is relevant for anyone who does business, listen to what it says, in the land of the rising sun. This guide, of course, will explain about it. I'm going to get into this. And, you know, for some people, maybe they don't like the videos being so long, but listen to this. And if you've been paying attention to all this, it's very important, because my key thing is this. Whether it's Jasmy, Quant, Ripple's XRP, Stellar's XLM, you name it, my thing is I want to be invested personally. None of this is financial advice. I'm just sharing what I'm personally doing. I want to be invested into where the institutional money is coming in. Because if you were excited about $3 trillion market cap back at late 2021, with BTC going to all-time highs of 69K on 11/11/2021, we were only about roughly $3+ trillion at that time for the overall crypto market cap. Institutional money could bring in anywhere from 5 to 15 trillion market cap. That's why we pay attention to this, and that's why we put so much focus on these utility-driven projects here at CTN. So, the Protection of Personal Information Act was initially passed all the way back in 2005. This was a significant shift in how personal information was protected. Originally, private business operators were monitored, like it mentioned, by the ministries and agencies. But did you know that the Japan Personal Information Protection Act looked to consolidate everything under the new Personal Information Protection Commission, which is called PPC? And the PPC is now required to provide guidelines for all private businesses, with additional guidelines for instance, like we mentioned before, healthcare. We're talking about payment channels, so finance, and even the telecommunications industries. The most obvious equivalent is the GDPR laws passed, for instance, in the European Union. There are many similarities between both laws, I should say. Now, what I want to jump down to is what you're going to see here. And, you know, there's some key things that are definitely worth getting into. This part. Does the APPI apply to my business? That's a great question. In principle, all businesses that obtain and handle the personal information of Japanese residents must comply with the APPI. Who would be one of the ones that are in regards to blockchain that would be part of that? You better believe it's Jasmy, who has great connections to industry, or I should say, world-changing, you know, people who can, you know, get things done, right? The game changers, if you will, the guys that set the rules, the regulations. Genki Oda. This is why we tie in a lot of this stuff. So how do the most recent, like it says, amendments affect the business? You know? And like it shows right here, most major international, look at this, data privacy rules, for instance, the APPI and its latest amendments don't provide much information on best practices. However, if you're in compliance with the EU's GDPR rules, the chances are your business, I should say, is already largely in compliance. Hence why you see, for instance, with Japan's DFFT, the European Union has already embraced it. Sure, it's not written to their own local laws of their lands and local municipalities and so on. Here's another perfect example. And remember when I showed you guys before in previous deep dives, remember that lady, Margaret Vestager, if that's how you pronounce it, how she talked about how, you know, she's really on board to, you know, take the baton from Terra Luna, for instance, and lead the European Union with data free flow with trust? You literally see it right before your eyes. Do you not? It says, let's take a look on how to become compliant. We're not going to get into that, but the next thing I want to show you this is a crucial thing, where it says updating the legacy systems. A lot of us are not fans of Ethereum. I'm not. But I do recognize that it is still a big player. It's probably always going to be around. And it says vulnerable technology could lead to breaches. Yes. And thus legal cases. Failing to take into account the new technology could inadvertently expose vulnerabilities. Yes. Ensure your company has the mechanism for carrying out regular system updates. We know that with blockchain, there's always regular updates. Again, put the two and two together. Now, let's jump to this part real quick, because I mean, this will help with the outline. This was published on June 2nd. Japanese regulators warn OpenAI against collecting sensitive data. Now, just hear me out on this. Japan's Personal Information Protection Commission has cautioned OpenAI against collecting data without consent. Again, it's a big deal, especially in Japan. This whole thing was reported like on Reuters a while back. There's other outlets, but the privacy watchdog also asked, for instance, OpenAI, which is, let's face it, Microsoft's version of like ChatGPT, to minimize the collection of sensitive data for machine learning. The regulator added that it may take further action against the startup in case of more concerns. But on top of that, the regulator emphasized the need to balance privacy concerns and the potential benefits of generative AI, such as boosting innovation and tackling problems like climate change. The warning comes, listen to this, after the Japanese government AI Strategy Council submitted a draft last week raising concerns over the lack of guardrails for AI and the risk it basically poses. Did you know that, for instance, in Italy, ChatGPT was temporarily banned after regulators scrutinized the firm's security protocols? However, all the way back on April 10th, Japan's Chief Cabinet Secretary Hirokazu Matsuno voiced support for OpenAI. He said that in Japan, they would consider incorporating AI like OpenAI's ChatGPT chatbot into government systems if privacy and cybersecurity concerns are addressed. Now, how is this all going to be addressed? Well, like it says, with the rapidly growing popularity of AI platforms, regulators around the globe are fumbling to rein in the new technology. Japan in particular may be incentivized to embrace AI to produce or boost productivity amid the declining population. On top of that, in May, Altman urged the U.S. Senate to regulate large AI models through a licensing body, a set of safety standards, and independent audit requirements. Now, you got to keep in mind when it comes to Jasmy, we know that they are going to have that AI tech engine. Of course, we're waiting to get more updates in that regard, but there's a totally different narrative over there in Japan when it comes to this. Now, maybe I wonder, well, Max, can you tie this all in together? Absolutely, I will. Let's jump to this, and this comes from Being Crypto, and again, it's really going to pound home why we put so much emphasis on these deep dives. At least it does it for me. I'm going to blow this up a little bit more. And I know that some of you guys have been paying attention to, what's going on with Coinbase. So, and rightfully so, right, Brian Armstrong? Japan crypto ambitions accelerated. Local industry players believe the crackdown could be an opportunity for Japan to grow its presence in the crypto space. Again, the whole point is Japan, Japan, Japan all the way. Now, a lot of people are going to say, you put more focus on Japan than you do on Jasmy. But again, it's understanding that we need the institutional money to come in, and that's big in itself, especially if you're a Jasmy holder. Local industry players believe the crackdown could be an opportunity for Japan to grow its presence in the crypto space. So while there's all this like negative FUD going on about, what the United States is doing and so on, this again is a chance for Japan to grow, especially in the crypto space. And you have been seeing more and more, things like trending in Japan, especially for Jasmy. This aggressive action in America, like it says, could help advance Asia and Japan as a hub. All right, think about that for a second. A hub for the sector since it has already established a solid legal framework. That's big in itself. On June 27th, as we know, Coinbase CEO Brian Armstrong reacted to the article stating that the United States is squandering an early lead. This was part because of Sam Bankman-Fried embarrassed some politicians and regulators who now want to look tough on crypto. Very true. It's a setback. The way to solve it is just get sensible regulations in place so consumers are protected and these issues will stop happening. But it's already there in plain sight. They already have the regulatory framework in Japan. That's why we highlight some of this. And again, to pound it home even that much more, look at this. Tokyo-based crypto exchange BitBank boss Naruki Hirosu commented, quote, "The U.S. regulators are increasingly tightening controls, but that doesn't mean the same things will happen in Japan." Yeah, very true. How so? Japan is a pioneer when it comes to crypto. They are, being among the first nations to establish legislation and regulations for the asset class. We are now finally seeing people like Jerome Powell labeling crypto as actually digital asset classes in itself. We just saw that what reported last week was all over crypto Twitter. But before then, before you've seen all these crazy things happening here in the United States with the SEC going after all this, it used to be that everything was under attack by the SEC. And on top of that, there was a narrative, even with the Fed, that, you know what, for instance, like Fed now going live on July 20th. Oh, no. This is not going to be, on blockchain or anything like that. This is, we're ready. We're live. We're ready to go. And now you see things like, a different narrative. Again, the narrative is shifting where they're embracing crypto. But why is the SEC still going after all this, right? Again, is this a perfect example of what we just mentioned? My key thing here is this. Japan gets it. They are the pioneers. And like it also says, Japanese regulations are strict. They are. And that requires crypto exchanges to register with the government and submit annual reports. Genki Oda is, again, part of BitPoint. And if anything, that is one of those exchanges that is very, very strict. He's also one of those guys that's part of the regulatory compliance of the FSA and so on. Again, if you're new to all this, understand how big that is, especially if you're a Jasmy holder. Now, I want to show you guys this. And we did talk about this last time I brought you guys a deep dive about 10 days ago. And I need to pound it home just that much more. A revised Payment Service Act came into effect this month and enabled the use of registered stablecoins for payments. Now, if you haven't seen that deep dive video, I highly advise you taking a look into it. Noritaka Okabe is the chief of Tokyo-based stablecoin startup JPYC, and this is what he said. In terms of regulations for stablecoins, Japan is clearly ahead of other countries. We've been getting quite a lot of these inquiries from overseas. Now, one of the other key things that we know is that with Jasmy, they have the DD coin, and that's referred to as data democratization coin. It's going to play a key factor into the whole mix, and I'm not going to do a deep dive on that because we already have. You're more than welcome to check out our recorded video section. All you got to do is go to our channel, click on videos, and you can see some of our deep dives in regards to all of that. Now, there's easing crypto tax rules, and this is another update. I mean, I know I'm tying all this together, but I didn't feel like doing like, a 5-minute video, 20 separate videos. So Japan's National Tax Agency published a partial revision of its corporate tax guidelines earlier this month. They include a new set of regulations for digital token issuers. Like, come on, who are some of those guys, right? We understand, like BitPoint especially. But like it says, scrapping previous high taxes on unrealized gains from crypto assets issued by companies. Well, this is a great incentive for like Genki Oda of BitPoint. And for instance, obviously for Jasmy holders as well, right? Big incentives. Like it says, this represents a step forward in improving the business environment in Japan. So in regards to a little bit more in regards to Japan, check this out. And this is one of the key highlights I want you to take away. Did you know that on June 26, Japan's financial regulator, the Financial Services Authority, again, the FSA, the Japanese SEC, announced a partnership with the Monetary Authority of Singapore, which is MAS. And this is, I guess you could say this is massive, no pun intended, for the joint regulation and pilot testing of cryptocurrency projects in accordance with the latter's Project Guardian initiative. Now, we know, and some people are going to say this is a stretch, but is it? Because we're going to match things up here in a bit. We know that there's a different thing mentioned when it comes to Jasmy and Smart Guardian. So is Smart Guardian worth mentioning in the same sentence as Project Guardian? Well, they're not the same thing. But there are some key things that we should point out to make sense of it all. So before we get into that, it says the participation will be limited to observer capacity for the FSA in its current phase. The regulators wrote, the project aims to test the feasibility of applications. Just hear me out on this. Of digital technologies such as, this is the juicy stuff, asset tokenization through pilot experimentations while managing risk to financial stability and integrity. Current industry pilots included fixed income, foreign exchange, and asset and wealth management. So if you're having asset tokenization, to me, that already spells out, for instance, like cryptocurrency. There's many projects, as we know, that have been tokenized. This is why we put so much focus, not even just on Jasmy, but let's face it, the Liechtenstein exchange, LCX, the tokenization of physical and digital assets, right? So, in regards to Project Guardian, like it says, it seeks to test feasibility of applications in asset tokenization, and even just that, guys, look what it says, DeFi. And what is the one that definitely stands out in DeFi when it comes to Japan, right? Through decentralization and so on, is Jasmy. Open and interoperable networks, trust anchors, asset tokenization, and you better believe it, institutional grade DeFi protocols. Doesn't have to even say Jasmy. I'm not so naive to realize who Jasmy is connected with. When, this is why we mentioned and put so much focus on that guy, Genki Oda, and so on, because he's very, very well connected. It gets better, though. Watch this. In one notable project from the initiative, look at this quote, DBS Bank, JP Morgan, and SBI Digital, and who's part of SBI Digital? Genki Oda. And what is Genki Oda also part of? BitPoint. And who is partnered with Jasmy? BitPoint. Who's the first to introduce BTC, as in Bitcoin, to the masses of Japan through actual kiosk or Bitcoin ATMs? Genki Oda through BitPoint. Again, I always got to remind people. I'll read this again. DBS Bank, JP Morgan, and SBI Digital Assets Holding conducted foreign exchange and government bond transactions against liquidity pools comprising of tokenized Singapore government security bonds, Japanese government bonds, Japanese yen, and Singapore dollar SGD. Meanwhile, HSBC, MarketNode, and UOB have since concluded a pilot test of, and here it is, blockchain structured product, while UBS is exploring the issuance of variable capital company funds on digital asset networks. Project Guardian isn't the first collaboration between the FSA and the MAS, but back in 2017, the two regulators established a joint fintech cooperation framework to promote innovation in the respective markets. And on top of that, look at this. Here we go. A reminder. Jasmy Smart Guardian. Now, of course, that was Project Guardian. Some people may say, well, you're just reading Guardian. But hear me out on this. Hear me out. Like it says, Jasmy also offers the Smart Guardian, which enables easy and secure registration of IoT, Internet of Things devices on the platform. It ensures that only the owner of the devices can utilize them within the network, enhancing security and privacy. So we have all these things that have been outlined from many years ago that we have now seen come into full fruition. We understand the concept of data free flow with trust. We understand where it's going. We understand where the European Union is embracing this. We also understand that there's a difference between Project Guardian and Smart Guardian, but man, it's A lot of similarities, right? But the key thing is also is like what it says, empowering individuals and fostering innovation into the IoT ecosystem. By decentralizing data control and empowering individuals, Jasmy fosters a more democratic and secure IoT ecosystem. In fact, like it shows, it encourages innovation by allowing businesses, organizations, and individuals to utilize the data generated by IoT devices while respecting privacy and data ownership. Everything we outlined on this whole entire deep dive video spells Jasmy 110%. At least it does in my opinion. Of course, there's going to be some people that they don't see it that way. And at the end of the day, I'm not giving anybody financial advice, but you know what? I do these deep dives to provide you guys some detailed information on how I personally look at things and how I go about connecting the dots. Now, before we close it up, you got to show you some of these key things. And that is token issuers. Like it says, in Japan, they no longer have to pay, of course, these corporate taxes on unrealized cryptocurrency gains. You know, over here in the United States, we call it capital gains tax. According to a law revised by the National Tax Agency, and that was back on June 20th, the tax exemption goes into effect nearly 6 months after the Japanese government approved a proposal eliminating the requirement of crypto firms to pay taxes on paper gains on tokens they issued and held. Legislators I'm getting ahead of myself. Legislators in Japan have been discussing new crypto tax rules since, listen to this, August, as part of a broader tax reform, of course, for 2023. But the tax authority has only given the final approval this week. Under the new rules, Japanese firms issuing tokens are exempt. That's right, exempt from paying taxes, or I should say a 30% corporate tax, not all the way, on their holdings. Before this law, even unrealized gains were, of course, subjected to taxation. So, I mean, when it comes to the concept of DFFT, when it comes to tax incentives, just when it comes to just embracing blockchain technology and distributed ledger technologies and so on, Japan, this is why we mention it so much. They are embracing crypto 100%, or as I would say, 110%. So, how about this? A little bit more. June 26th, just a few days ago, the Japan Times reported that the U.S. cryptocurrency crisis could be a boom, that's a typo, for Japan. This is going to pound it home that much more on why I feel as though I got to put more emphasis on acquiring more Jasmy, at least for me. I'm not telling you what you have to do. But, there's a reason why I state that when it comes to Japan and when it comes to Jasmy, this digital asset of Jasmy could get me to the promised land first, because in Japan, they already get it. While here in the United States, we're trying to, hate to say it, pull our heads out of our butt. So Japan's crypto ambitions accelerated. Local industry players believe the crackdown could be an opportunity for Japan to increase its presence in the crypto space. They already are. Aggressive action in the United States could help push Asia and Japan forward as a hub. Again, back to what was mentioned earlier, for this sector. It has already established a strong legal framework. I mean, this is why I mentioned DFFT is that regulatory framework that we all need to get clarity, because once clarity is there, you're going to see big things, and we're really seeing a taste of that. Perfect example, if you guys have been following this, the ETF application from Coinbase. How about what was reported on our live show last night? Even Fidelity recently applied for an ETF application. Exchange traded funds. The reason why that is so important to pay attention to these things is because that is the institutional money coming in. But what about the institutional money in Japan already embracing crypto? And you have certain blockchain projects that have utility and have, for instance, multiple layers of utility to protect data privacy through healthcare industries, through the payment sectors and so on, through many different industries. Metaverse, like it says right here. On June 27th, Coinbase CEO Brian Armstrong reacted, of course, to the article, and we really quoted some of this. But Japan's metaverse ambitions, a virtual power play. We understand that Jasmy is a blockchain project that is trying to embrace and get into Metaverse as well, educating from an educational standpoint or even from the entertainment standpoint. They understand there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be in different metaverse platforms. But at the end of the day, they want their privacy protected, their data protected. Metaverse is going to be huge. Just because you don't see it huge yet, wait till we get to that point of mass adoption. All right. Last but not least, to wrap things up, okay? And that is this. What are some of the next steps, right? Everybody asks us, what's the next step for DFFT and so on, right? So the G7 Digital and Tech Ministers Declaration will help guide the digital economy and technology discussions at the upcoming G7 Leader Summit. That meeting, of course, is set to begin on May 19th. It happened, but Japan, like it says, will continue to advance their DFFT, data free flow with trust, AI governance, digital trade priorities in the interim. They are seeking a global leadership or global convening roles coming out of the Leader Summit. These continue Japan's general policy trends all the way back since 2019, because we know that Shinzo Abe basically originally introduces to the World Economic Forum. Outside of informing the leader level discussions, the G7 Digital and Technologies Ministers meeting also called for the convening of a, listen to this, digital competition summit in the fall of 2023. This is where we got to pay real close attention to what's going on with Japan, because now you're seeing things really come to fruition. Remember when Taro Kono was mentioning some of these things, that he's going to start off small and it was going to be by the end of the year? Again, here is maybe a little bit of some of the acceleration, because that is obviously fall and winter are two different stories. Winter is the end of 2023. If its broader efforts are effective at the leader and multi-stakeholder level, listen to this, this could be the first form in which Japan, here's the juicy stuff, attempts to institutionalize and implement data free flow with trust and AI related policy priorities that will be agreed upon at the G Leaders Summit. Boil it, mash it, stick it in a stew. The competition summit could take place alongside or as a part of the in-person G7 trade ministers meeting. And look at this, guys. You want a date? Here's some dates. It is scheduled to take place in Osaka, Sakai from October 28th to the 29th of 2023. Are you kidding me? We're going to get some of that. What? And let's highlight it again. The first forum in which Japan attempts its institutionalized and implementation of DFFT and AI-related policy priorities. This is the regulatory framework that we've been talking about, because it's going to be put into policy. I'm telling you flat out, everything that we've been talking about, and you've seen other content creators talking about, I'll come back into the frame, about we need something that is going to create that clarity for institutional money to come in. I'll tell you this much. Even if you're not a person who is invested into Jasmy, think about this for a moment. There's so many people that ape into projects, and we know when it comes to FOMO, aping and FOMO are two, literally two of the same thing, right? If you ape into something, that means you didn't do any of your own research. But I can tell you this much. We get over 100K BTC. That's absolutely huge for Bitcoin. Some people got a lot higher than that. Some people stating 175. I've seen it even as high as over 200,000, a Bitcoin. But the point is this, and I want you to take this away from this long, extended deep dive. Sometimes I go too far with it. I do apologize. And that is this. If you understand that there will be a utility run, then pay attention to this. Who are some of the key players that are part of blockchain that will be part of the mix as far as getting institutional grade services and so on to bring in that massive wave of institutional money to contribute towards the overall crypto market cap? This is what I'm talking about, where you get the 5 trillions, the 10 trillions, or 15 plus trillion added to the overall crypto market. you better believe that if Jasmy was able to reach the top 100 on CMC coin market cap, I think we reached what, 96 or 97 before things went south with the bad news with Binance. If they were able to achieve the top 100 with that momentum, can you imagine what's going to happen with some of these big things like we shown in October with this institutional policies? So I won't keep you guys anymore. I know there's been a delay from my videos. I hope to be able to get back in the rhythm of consistently getting this out to you guys. At the end of the day, don't give in to FUD. At the end of the day, you know what you have. You know why you hold it. Let's finish this race together. Crypto and solid projects. Solid projects, right? We need to finish this race because these things are the true digital assets that we simply just need to hold and wait it out for when the real bull market happens or when the utility run comes here. Just because it hasn't happened before doesn't mean it won't. Pay attention to not just a bull market, but my God, pay attention to what's going to happen for the institutional money. And that means a utility run. Like, comment, subscribe if you haven't done so already. Thanks again for watching. I'm sounding a little hoarse. You all have a blessed day. We will see you on the next one.